So we might get started. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Liz Knight. I'm the Executive Director with the Newcastle Anglican Corporation. So I look after the Samaritans Foundation and 4 of our schools up in the Newcastle Diocese. Some of you may know me. I've been around for a long time. I used to work with the department, and for the last few years I've worked in the NGO sector. It's really important that we are here today, and I'd like to thank all of you for making the effort, possibly for the first time in many months, years, to come out in person. It was a big decision for us to decide to hold this event in person, but we just feel it is so important. The Homestretch campaign, led by Paul McDonald, has had incredible outcomes across the nation, except for New South Wales. We are the last to sign up to this campaign. Now, I hope I don't need to tell you that the leaving care program in New South Wales is broken. Children and young people have to fight every day to get the most basic supports once they turn 18. To get better outcomes for these young people so that they live the life they deserve, the Homestretch campaign needs to be adopted here in New South Wales. And so we are seeking your support to actively campaign for this really significant and important change of policy. We've got so I'd like to welcome you all, particularly our members of Parliament, people who are long-term supporters, David Shoebridge, MLC in particular. But each of you have a role to play in making sure we're successful in achieving this outcome. So just some housekeeping. So COVID, masks are optional, so that's your decision. We have hand sanitiser here. We should have all checked in and double vaccinated. Bathrooms are just outside. We'll have a break for morning tea about 10:45, and then you're all invited for lunch at 12:30 for an opportunity to talk together and really start to commit to what we're going to do to take this forward. So of course we couldn't start any event without welcome to country, and a very warm welcome to Uncle Alan Murray.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Good. Just saying to Paul some time ago is that in terms of the leadership that I represent is very concerned about this area, very concerned, and given that if you look at the pattern of Aboriginal people being removed from their country or Aboriginal children being removed from their families, so it's the same pattern over and over again. So our leadership is very concerned, particularly our grandmothers are very concerned about how the system is not working correctly. There's been a recent, on just a bit of divesting, in recent there is capo meetings happening as we speak amongst all the peak Indigenous bodies across New South Wales, and a lot of money is going into the system and guess what? There's no money coming out of the system to support families in this crisis or extended families. So leadership is very concerned, but when our grandmothers get in front of our leadership and tell us that we're doing it wrong, then we listen. So my name is Alan Murray. I'm here to do the Welcome to Country. Welcome to Country is probably a symbol when we don't conduct the Welcome to Country in its true form. Normally we'll have a ceremony, we have a song and dance, and then we'll light the fire. Before we start, you are strangers to this country. Before we have this smoking ceremony and the smoke, we ask that you pass through the smoke in order to be cleansed. And then you become friends. It's different when those tall ships came through Botany Bay and Sydney Harbour, because the communities along the eastern coast saw these tall ships come through and they lit the smoke. So to say invaders are coming into our country, this country here has been stolen from us. It's our sovereignty, it's our rights. No one in our clans gave up our ownership. There's no piece of paper to say we gave this land to the British. So we're concerned about that, and we'll continue, and we'll keep on raising it. Before you become friends, I want to say this, is that even though we're only, 2 floors up from the ground, if you want to be part of our legacy, and that is 40,000 years, 60,000 years, 120,000 years, whereby the Gadigal people of this land, Aboriginal people, and the Torres Strait Islander people have been on this continent, on the coast, in the rivers, on the islands, in the sea. That's how long we've been. We understand how to survive in this country, and we'll continue to survive, even through different policies that are used to guide us, tell us what to do, despite our laws and our customs. I want to also acknowledge any First Nations people here in this room, and I want to acknowledge them for the continuation of our culture and also wearing our colours. Thank you. This lady said she got this wonderful purse. Can we show this purse? Can we show it? Didn't buy it here in Australia, bought it in Rome. So, and I think it's quite fitting to say, yes, our colours can go around the world and be recognised. And with that, I want to say that we are friends, because if we had that smoking ceremony, just think about it, how important it is, because our tradition starts from that. Lighting a fire ignites us and tells us in stories. And also our stories continue to say, yes, we are on Aboriginal land, Gadigal land. I want to pay respects to the elders past, present and future. I want to thank you for coming. One of the things about doing these type of forums is make sure you are the right leaders, you have got the right commitment, and also you have the right heart to make sure we can make a change for our young people. And thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
I too would like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Aboriginal land. I'd like to acknowledge the strength, beauty and wisdom of our First Nations people's culture, and there is so much we can learn from that. And also acknowledge the impact of white government policy and the devastation on their culture and community. And we 50% now of kids in care are Aboriginal. So I'll talk to Paul once we've nailed home stretch. We'll have to tackle that one. So moving on, I'd like to welcome Jason Juretic. Jason is the chair of the New South Wales Home Stretch campaign. Jason I didn't know this, it's always interesting reading people's bios, isn't it? Jason has enjoyed a very varied career, starting his working life as a pilot in the United Kingdom Royal Air Force. He then moved into security and counter-terrorism roles. I'm sure that's helping him in his job today. He's then taken on management and executive leadership roles to travel, transport, IT and supply chain industries. Jason has dedicated over 25 years in both volunteer and professional roles to develop, mentor and support disadvantaged children and youth to become the very best they can be. So thank you, Jason.
Thanks. You hear me okay? Great stuff, thanks. I know it's a varied background, and a lot of people ask me how did I come to work in this sector? In short, just so you can see or better understand why I am here, my mum tried to take us to a refuge when I was 5 years old, but unfortunately it didn't work out, and we then faced 11 years of just suffering that was just unnecessary at home, and it made me very passionate about helping children, young people who are experiencing disadvantage, but in some ways some significant issues at home. And it's about providing them a safe place to be able to live. And very fortuitously, for the last 7 years, I've been in a position where I've led a great organisation, quite small, some of you probably won't even heard of us, called Stepping Stone House, and we provide accommodation and support for children and young people, unusually between the ages of 12 to 25. And that sort of 18 to 25 is one of the reasons why I stepped up to take this role as the chair. Because at Stepping Stone House, we are supporting young people who have come out of care, who are over 18, and we're seeing the outcomes are outstanding. In the last 5 years, we've seen 100% of the children and young people coming through Stepping Stone House who've been supported after they're 18 years old. 100% have secured employment. And there's so many more of them actually completing education, all these outcomes. So that became very compelling for me to want to step into this role. Let me just grab this. So thanks for joining us today. There's a lot of changes happening in the sector. Myself and a number of the committee members here have been on this campaign now for 4, coming up to 5 years. We've met with Gareth Ward to start with, and to be frank, we didn't get very far there. There was quite a block there. And then in more recent months, we started working with Minister Alistair Henskins, who's got some interest. There's some questions coming there rather than just blocking. So we see some hope here in terms of actually getting this across the line. From a New South Wales perspective, I think there's some DCJ representatives here. What we are hearing is that yes, there is support for kids who are leaving care. It's leaving care support, but it's not extended care. And today, what we will be doing is we'll be going through and looking to achieve these 4 things. So the first one is, just where are we from a state and national perspective? By far, Paul is the leader of this campaign, and he will succinctly explain what's happening and how we compare with other states. You heard it from Liz. We need to get this over the line. We're the only state right now that has no extension of care past the age of 18. But you'll get greater information on that. And also the clarity on what is extended care. I am getting CEOs from within this sector consistently coming to me going, but what do you mean? We are actually supporting kids after 18. It's really important that we are, by the end of this morning's session, that we actually fully and clearly understand the difference between what is being offered currently, which is just leaving care support versus full extension. The third thing is increasing support to affect change. We can get this over the line. It will happen, but we want to get it to happen as fast as possible. That's what we've got to do. We're seeing it's happen in UK, US, New Zealand. It's going to happen here. It's just about us positioning and getting it right over the line. And I think it's actually going to be the voice of the young people that achieve it in the end. And I'm really happy that a young person, and as Matthew here will speak in just a moment or two. So collectively we can make it happen, and that's what we need to do. It's not moving to the next one for some reason. Maybe it's because I was hitting the wrong green button. Yeah, thank you very much. There's some interesting stats came out of Swinburne Uni in 2015, a research that was done there which stated 63% of all young people experiencing homelessness came from the out-of-home care system. So they'd touched the system. 63%, that's a large number. So we look at New South Wales, just this number here, we've got 9,042 in the cohort that we're looking at the moment, 9,042. So 60%, 63%, or 2/3 of those are experiencing homelessness. That means that 6,000 youngsters right now would be coming out into homelessness. That's what switches me on. We know that there's 1,200 kids aging out of care each year, and we know that about 50 to 60% of those ending up homeless or touching or incarcerated or teenage parents. And those are the youngsters that I really believe that we can help here. I would like to talk to Matthew, or Matthew to talk to you, just to give you some context. Matthew came to Stepping Stone House at the age of 15, and I have coached over the years through different youth organisations, probably over 200, 300 kids. He was by far the sharpest 16-year-old I'd ever met. A bit too sharp for his own good, to be frank, but a really sharp individual. And he had lots of grit. And what we've seen in more recent years was he's 18 now. You are 18, aren't you? Yep, 18. Is that he is really passionate about becoming an advocate, is actually standing up and helping change the system for kids who are in care, coming out of care, but also those who are facing homelessness as well. When I say he's got grit, I'll explain why. Give you an example of grit. At Stepping Stone House, we have these wilderness camps that are optional for the kids to attend. We go away for 7 days. They carry their own packs for 7 days. And they get given on the left-hand side a bivouac, which they can sleep in. So this is -4 degrees. I got up early in the morning to get the sunrise. And then when I got up, I realized that Matthew, that's him in the sleeping bag at the bottom there, -4 degrees, was lying in his sleeping bag. He said, no, I really wanted to try myself and see what I could achieve. So I went above him and took a photograph of him. But so this is Matthew. But this, to me, is what he's about. You know, he is about pushing the limits and really out there to see. He's got a lot of grit, and I really think he's going to be remarkable in being able to help systemically change the system to support children and young people. If you want to come up, Matthew, all yours.
Hello, thank you everyone. First off, I'd just like to pay my respects to the Indigenous and First Nations people of the Gadigal land of the Eora Nation. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land, and sovereignty was never ceded. So, this photo is not one of my proudest moments. Okay, this photo is definitely proudest moments, but it does, I think, very much exemplify the amount of opportunity that organizations like Stepping Stone House and a lot of the organizations that you people here represent, like Anglicare, the Create organization, and Uniting, they gave me opportunities during my time in care that I just didn't think I would have otherwise, and one of them was this wilderness adventure camp. Look, I came into care at 14. Like a lot of other young people, it was after a series of abusive and neglectful acts on behalf of my parents. And I didn't really know how to process that, or how to deal with that, or that I had to process or deal with it. So I was placed into foster care and moved from home to home, eventually ending up at 15 in Stepping Stone House. It was the first time in my life where I could let my guard down. I could finally feel safe and supported without this need of being on my toes all the time, of needing to be a token for my foster parents or be some sort of symbol of charitable donation. There was no expectation on me to be a particular kind of person, and there was an environment for me to grow into the person that I am now. Stepping Stone House offered me support for a decade. Like I said, I entered Stepping Stones at 15, and they offered me support until I was 25, knowing full well that government support would cut off at the age of 18. I moved through the Stepping Stone House programs, did their transition to independent living, and at 17 years old, I found myself in my own apartment, which was an incredible achievement. In a city, my own apartment was amazing. The downside of that, in 6 months' time, I knew the support I had come to rely on for a good 5 years now was going to be swept from under my feet. I remember describing to my caseworker that it felt like I was being shoved off a cliff. This feeling of suddenly being hopeless without any funding or any opportunity for success in my life. I thought that I was going to end up in the cycle of poverty that I'd tried so hard to claw myself out of. Luckily for my own part, I was able to get in touch with other organizations, like I said, with Uniting. I'm now in the Foyer Central program, and I intend to do my law degree in a couple of years. And that's all really well and exciting, but that's not representative of the majority of young people in out-of-home care. So many of my friends experienced that same fear and anxiety leading up to 18 that really crushed them. It made them feel like they didn't have the opportunity to go forward in life, and I understand that. All in all, when I left care, my aftercare funding was $22,000 total. In Victoria, they get $22,000 a year. That $22,000 that we get up here in New South Wales is discretionary for 7 years. That's not going to last anyone 7 years. I couldn't pay my rent with that for 7 years, let alone eat or go and put myself through education. So I guess I just really want to stress the point that we know how much this type of support is going to change the lives of young people, and the government's intense refusal to move forward on this policy is just another symbol of their unwillingness to change. Thank you.
Is there any questions for myself or Matthew? No? All right. Well spoken, Matthew. You can hear it, as I said, I think it's the voice of the youth that will make the changes here. We can see even in DCJ that there are some changes. We've had the changes, Simone. We've got Coots Trotter stepped out. He understands this, he gets this. And I think now that he's become a bureaucrat, there's some opportunities for us to be able to push this forward. Please listen in today. Take some notes on the actions that we're going to be asking you to take, because we can change this. We will change. We just want to get it as fast as possible. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Matthew, for your courage and your willingness to share your story. I've heard so many stories just like yours, and the struggle that young people face every day and the fear they have of their future because there is no safety net is why we're here today and why we need your support. So, of course, we're all here because of Paul McDonald. Paul is the National and Founding Chair of Homestretch and the CEO of Anglicare Victoria. Prior to this, he was the Deputy Secretary of Children, Youth and Family Division in the Department of Human Services for the Victorian Government. In 2020, Paul won the National Pro Bono Influencer Award for his pivotal role in driving the Homestretch campaign. In 2017, Paul was awarded the prestige Robin Clark Leadership Award, the state's most celebrated child protection award that recognises a leader who inspires others about achieving the best outcomes for Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal children, young people and their families. Paul is going to speak to us.
You're not here because of me, you're here because of yourselves, because you matter about this. So, very kind of Liz to say that, but I just wanted to emphasise that. Look, before I start, I just want to go back to that photo of the sleeping bag, if you don't mind. And I just want to turn this off, that's all right. And no, the next one, Lorenzo, the one with, he's got his thumb. Okay. I was looking at that, and I've got a different take on this photo, if you don't mind. That's the leaving care system. That's the kid in there going, I'm hopeful, yeah, someone's going to look after me, and that's what we offer. That's it. And in terms of debate, it's 85%, oh, but we've got this leaving care system, we've got this leaving care, 85, 90%. And about that represents the story of the kid who says, well, it's not working for me. That 35% of us have had 5 places of abode. That 50% of us will be in homeless or in prison or new parent within my first 12 months of leaving care. We don't ever hear this, but we rattle around talking this up, but literally this is what we offer. Anyway, sorry, Lorenzo, I just saw that photo. First of all, I also want to acknowledge I'm on land. I want to thank Uncle Alan for welcoming us to the land, and I want to pay my respects. When I'm down Victoria, I normally do it in Woiwurrung language, but I want to just pay my respects to Unc and the local people and the elders, and how important it is that we tell this story for the young people who are Indigenous in care. And we all don't want young people who are Indigenous in care. And that's what I was saying to Unc as we're doing. That's not our objective. But if they're going to be in care, if they're going to have to be in care, we want the best care for them. And grow them up as good with the great hopes and expectations that we want all those young adults to do. Let's go to the videotape, Lorenzo, if we could.
What did you do on your 18th birthday? Have a party? Maybe have your first legal drink of alcohol? Or even get your driver's license? Me? I had to find somewhere to live, learn how to survive on the dole, start fending for myself, because I grew up in foster care. That's how it works in Australia. As soon as you turn 18, the funding for out-of-home care stops. You're even cut off from your care worker. You're on your own. It's pretty crazy if you think about it. Kids are in out-of-home care because they've had it tough. They've often suffered physical and emotional abuse. They're vulnerable. Without a stable background, many of them just aren't prepared for adulthood. people wouldn't do it to their own kids. They often live with their parents until well into their 20s these days. The results are predictable. Too many of us end up with drug problems, mental health issues, living on the streets, or in jail. In the UK, New Zealand, Canada, even in the US, out-of-home care is extended until you're 21. There's high-level research by Deloitte showing how that actually benefits everyone. How for every extra dollar spent on providing out-of-home care till age 21, society benefits by at least $2 in reduced crime, mental health care, hospitalisation, homelessness, and drug dependency. We see it already, where carers have taken it on themselves to continue providing out-of-home care past the age of 18. They're almost always better adjusted, healthier, more educated, and more productive. Not every young adult in out-of-home care will choose to stay in care after they turn 18, but they all deserve that chance. It's time to give vulnerable young Australians more time, because just 3 more years of support and a place to call home can make a lifetime of difference.
Thanks, Lorenzo. So that gives you just a bit of an orientation of why we've all bothered to turn up for maybe the first time physically in this room to discuss this issue. That's how important it is. In fact, how important it is, I got on the plane for the first time in 2.5 years this morning. And whilst dealing with the personal challenges of having someone sitting on either side of me, I got through the experience okay, and I'm COVID-free. So, and how do you guys do it in New South Wales? We've only been locked up by about 286 days, isn't it, in Victoria? I don't know what it is, Irina, but you came, you handled it, then it went up, but you got it down. We've still got the thousands, but we'll get there. We're just watching you guys how you do it. I'm just wondering how to, the green one? Thanks, mate. Okay, so where are we at? What's some stats and facts? Now, the trouble about stats and facts, I will say on the outset, and working in out-of-home care and family welfare for many years, you don't want to be too blasé and cavalier about stats and facts, because as you know, as I know, everyone is a life. Everyone is a story. Everyone is a kid that has some sort of history like we've just heard, and their story. So, but in New South Wales at the moment, we've got around 1,159 young people being exited by the system. Exited. Now, what's this exited? Well, in fact, actually the formal relationship between the state and the child severs, finishes. Now, you might say, why 15 to 17? Isn't it 18? Well, it's in fact actually 40% of the young people exited by the system are 16, and 60% will be exited within their 17th year. That's why we've got these sort of numbers. So when we think about exiting, the formal relationship severs. So there's no watching over you, no formal partnership. And whether the kid has been raised by the foster carer or the kinship carer or the residential care, many of them that I hang around with, talk with, they still see the state as the parent, walking away from the partnership, severing without discretion. It doesn't matter if you're pregnant, it doesn't matter if you're in hospital with a life-threatening illness. It doesn't matter if you got caught next month. It doesn't matter if you're actually depressed. It doesn't matter if you took your own life last week. It doesn't matter if you're a well-adjusted adult, young person. The state says it's only based on your birth date, and that is the only decision-making that we will make about whether you continue with our relationship or it's exited. Nothing else is brought into account. And so what we've seen is around 1,200. And we see some of these numbers. We've heard them, 35%, 5 or more places of both, just in the first 12 months. 29% will be unemployed. 28% were already parents at the time of their exit within their first 12 months. And so on. And juvenile justice, high representations of care leavers there. And as Jason had also explained, 2/3 from the Swinburne National Youth Homeless Study says that in fact actually 2/3 of the nation's homeless young people are in fact care leavers. I mean, this isn't really a care strategy, though it is, but this is a homeless strategy as well in relation to this overrepresentation of this cohort. And as we know, 85%, as the Hilda study tells us, 85% are still living with one or both parents between the 18 to 21 year olds. Now, if you have a look at the ABS study, it'll tell you that the average leaving home age is 24 and a half. But let's stay with the 18 to 21. So that's not to get up there, which is 50%. We've still got 85% still with one or both parents. What is going on there? Well, I think parents are seeing that you're not ready to go. I think the kids self-choosing, saying, in fact, being around this home, being around this infrastructure, being around mum and dad, I need this at the moment. It's not that you go to bed when you're 17 and 364 days on the eve of your 18th birthday and you wake up and an adult you become. But the system still thinks like this. This is why we've got to bring the folly of the system, yesterday's thinking, to the attention of the New South Wales government, to the attention of the Peritek government. Now, we've got Susan Badawi who will talk about the summary of the legislation here in New South Wales. So I won't stay too long on it. But I want to acknowledge there is a thing called leaving care legislation in the New South Wales. Not extending continuing care, leaving care. Now, I personally have a problem with leaving care, I must say, from a grammatical point of view. I actually find it an oxymoron. I don't know how you can care and leave at the same time. It's sort of like, beware, David, but an election promise? Is that an oxymoron? Not sure. Let's go a bit safer. Fun run, something like that. Anyway, I find leaving care an oxymoron. Yet we bandy this term around as if it works. How do you care and leave at the same time? How does, not from us as adults, we can sort of work it out, oh, it's all done really okay, Paul, don't worry about it. But the kid on the end, I'm leaving, but you're giving me something to help me out. I don't get that. And so that there is financial assistance, but it's only up to really around, on an average, 3 to 4 months. It isn't 3 years. And we're not talking, every time the minister comes out and says, oh, we've got post-care support in the legislation. Well, I'm not talking about post-care support to 25, Minister. I'm actually about continuing the relationship by the state just to 21. I'm not even asking you to go to 25. Just continue the relationship, the formal servicing of the child without without a plan or anything, but a continuation of that service through to 21. That's it. Oh, we've got leaving care plans, but I'm not talking about leaving care, Minister. I'm talking about continuing the relationship with the child like any parent would through to 21. So that's why it's not, you'll never see Homestretch talk about improving leaving care. We think that could be good for some kids, but we're not about that group of kids. We're about the kids that aren't ready to go, that don't actually say, well, leaving care sounds like sort of some, half thought up, social work idea that we think is going to work. And we know that the findings from the Office of the Children's Guardian just this year said that, well, there's 635 young people turned 18 between March and December. Just 1/3 continue to receive casework support, thumbs up. However, much of the casework was following up on the leaving care tasks that had not completed before 18. So nothing going on about what do I do when I'm 19 or 20 or how do I do this. It's all about mopping up that the department didn't fix up. And I get it. The department thinks, I was in charge of the Child Protection Department for a number of years in Victoria. And I can say to you, the department approaches the kid much like my grandmother used to have. Eileen, rest her soul, she's dead, but I'll tell you, come around for dinner, so we go around for dinner, the whole family, my 4 other brothers and sisters, mum and dad, go around to Nan's. We sit there Sunday night, be great. Oh, now, who's for dessert? Oh, well, yeah, that'd be great, Nan, that'd be fun. I'll go and get dessert. So it was about 8 o'clock and she goes to get dessert. She brings out the dessert in her pyjamas. So we're going to enjoy the dessert, but Nan is saying, and by the way, you are going. That's the care system. We're going to care for you, and running it gets a little bit disinterested with the 15, 16, 17-year-old as a care system because we know you're on your way. So we'll provide you with whatever we need to do, but by the way, you're going. And that's how we're treating these young people. That's how we're raising them, because that's our job in out-of-home care. We're not managing these children, we're raising them. So, with that being interesting in relation to the latest report, we also saw a 2017 parliamentary committee. I won't get through all of this, but I will say this. Recommendation 14 be amended, the New South Wales Parliamentary, to provide a clear non-discretionary responsibility on the Minister to provide ongoing support for the young adults up to at least the age of 21. Non-discretionary. Every kid has the right the entitlement, as the New Zealanders call it, to actually have the care. And if you want to know what the Victorian legislation says about the responsibilities of the Secretary, it's summed up in one word: the obligation of the Secretary to provide the support and the care and the resources through to 21. So, what's the problem? There exists no legislative capacity. Don't worry about what the punters out there say or the Minister says. There is no legislative capacity in New South Wales for a young person to seek the option to formally have their arrangements continued through to 18. And I'd probably safely say there is not one young person, aside from the Uniting trial, in New South Wales, post-care, receiving care for 3 years guaranteed. I'd probably bet my house on it. There is no provision to provide reimbursements to foster and kinship carers, so let's just leave the foster and kinship carers on their own. I had a grandmother in my office on Zoom, a Zoomed office, just telling me 4 weeks ago, Paul, I'm 78, my husband's 82, I live in a 2-bedroom flat in a not-so-flash suburb. Of course I'm not going to kick out my 18-and-a-half-year-old granddaughter. Of course I'm not going to do that. But I feel like I've been abandoned by the state. I feel like we've got to, how do I afford, but also how do I keep on that support of that worker who used to come around and help us with all sorts of things. So even carers feel abandoned by the state. And people say, oh, look, this is social capital. This is, just let the foster carers take over. Well, the foster carers, many will, bless them. Many of the kinship carers will, bless them. But why are we relying on the good heart of the volunteer to finish off the job rather than the state say, we're in it as well? Why is the state walking away from some of the hardest years that carer will have to go through to say, oh, you're on your own now? And so this is sort of the other debate about, can't the carers do it? And as I was asked by Frank Kelly on Radio National, but the carers are doing it, and I said, yeah, but it's sort of like building the Sydney Harbour Bridge, Fran, I said, and stopping 3/4 of the way and go, oh yeah, job done. I think that's a good job. I think we can go now. They can make their own way. And so that's why we're seeing that we need to pop these balloons and say, continued care could be. Now internationally, we know that extended care, I won't go through all of them, but that's just the start of the countries that have adopted extended care. And who would have thought United States out of the blocks, but they've been out of the blocks about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And what they saw was, with the crack crisis, they saw the great wave of out-of-home care kids coming in and then moving into the emergency relief system, into the crack crisis, and they just saw this continual generation after generation of kids being reliant on the Fed system as they do in the United States. And they had this introduced legislation that now from those 30 states, I think we're up to 43 states in the United States now have extended care legislation. England staying put, going the extra mile, all the rest. And what did they find? Well, if you have a look at 2008, which is probably the most reliable in research terms, and you have a look at what Courtney and Chicago University have been following this right across the states, they've proven that they've actually halved the homeless rate for this cohort, which is a very significant thing given that they make up 2/3 of the youth homeless population for Australia. Doubled education participation, doubled the odds of employment, reduced pregnancies by 38%, teenage pregnancies, and young women are just making better choices. They're making better choices because they're still feeling that we're in an area of support, reductions in arrests, etc. And then we've seen coming out more detailed this is the Cal Youth study. They've been following 780 young people in extended care now for 6-7 years. Look, this has been highlighted, the criminal justice, only because we know that the department's dealing with homelessness and justice as well as care. Reduced arrests by 41% from this 720 age group, 720 cohort in California, and reduced the odds of being convicted by 40%. But let's look at a couple of others. Decreased odds of being homelessness, couch surfing by 28%. Food assistance, in the sense of decreased receipt of food assistance. Young people feeling like they're more empowered. Increase their probability of enrolling in college, 10 to 11%, and so on and so forth. And in fact, what Chicago University ended up doing is a meta-analysis of all the studies on extended care right around the world to actually find, is there one little negative that slides the wrong way on extended care? And the result of that meta-analysis is there was not one study that showed a negative impact on any, in any regard, in any corner of a social issue in relation to these young people. UK found the same thing. They're in fact more likely to be in full-time training employment at 19, twice as likely to be in full-time education, again through the staying put, where they extended care for the foster care system through to 21. And they found a couple of things. This is from the Leeds study. Have a look at these numbers. 7.4% lived in unsuitable accommodation from the staying put program. Post-staying put, that's pre-staying put, 1.8% unsuitable. Care leavers were in custody. 102 care leavers at the time, on a point in time, were in custody. One at a staying put outcome. This was 2 years hence from the staying put outcome. One young person in custody. You've got the education pluses there, etc. So the evidence is pretty good. It's not a thought bubble or good idea. It's actually starting to see these international trends, starting to see right in every country that's introduced extended care. And then the New Zealanders introduced it, and they introduced also this word of, we're going to legislate and an entitlement for young people to remain or return care. So they own the language of saying it's a right, it's an actual entitlement for a child to be in care to seek the state to continue my support for another 3 years. So, as that little short video showed, we've done a range of cost and benefit analysis, and you might remember this one here in particular. So Deloitte's done 5 studies, but one they did about, was it 2 years ago? Extending care to 21 just for New South Wales. And it wasn't $2 return for every $1 on extended care. They in fact actually found that it was a $3.40 return for every $1 for New South Wales, when you include wellbeing costs like my mental health and my physical wellbeing, as well as my reduction in hospitalisations, justice and homelessness. So, you know, it's more than a tripling of the investment. And in a sense for the government, they're saying, I was saying earlier, oh, well, this means new money. And I said to the minister when we met with him, you're writing cheques already, Minister. You're already spending the money. You're spending money on your homeless refuge, on your hospitalisations, on your juvenile justice detention. You're spending it already on this group. But don't you want to spend it in terms in which we can show proven trajectories, upward improvements in relation to this cohort? And Deloitte went further. They estimated in New South Wales they would start seeing even smoking, educational participation, teenage pregnancies, hospitalisations decrease. They even went further and said, well, what would this impact in relation to lifestyles for these young people? So we've had some good progress, but really, New South Wales, it's key that we get, this state really also embracing this outcome. Let's have a look at just a quick whistle stop of where we're up to around the country in relation to extended care. In summary, 6 of Australian states and territories have adopted formal extended care. No leaving care support. No, I can tell you that every one of those, including New South Wales, all had leaving care programs. All mentioned, I think 2 or 3 of them mentioned, we do leaving care support till 25. All said, yeah, we help out with leaving care support programs. Every one of the states who have adopted extended care already had it. And yet they said, we are seeing poor outcomes. We're going to go this yard. We're going to actually introduce extended care. So Victoria, universal extended care now to 21. Foster, kinship, residential and permanent care. It didn't want to give a disincentive for young people not to be also placed permanently. Now I know there's a bit of change in language around the country about adoption, permanent care and all of that, and here in particular in New South Wales. So permanent care being those, what they call, I'm aware of the language, but conversions, if you have that language here in conversions, that is the foster carer holds the kid and decides I'm going to be the permanent carer, I'm going to be the adoptive parent. So those care supports go through to 21 as a result. And drafted legislation. And we'll have a look at how they did it in a tick. South Australia, extended care to 21, foster kinship, and now that minister, and it's not done on party political lines, folks, there's a Labor government and there's a Conservative government, and she's now, Minister Sanderson's introducing trialling residential care to 21. West Australia the same, announced universal care after 4 trials. McGowan announced it in his last election platform, and now they're introducing foster kinship and residential care, all through 21. So there's no sort of, oh, by the way, what's your leaving care plan, or you're 15, you're going to have a leaving care plan, or by the way, what are you going to be doing, and maybe we will, maybe we won't help you out, I don't know what it is. No, it's you have the right to go through to 21, and we'll decide that right to you when you're 14 or 15, if you like. Not till you're 17 and a half, will I be going well? No, at 15. Now that's what a good leaving care plan, if we want to talk about leaving care plans. So, Australian Capital Territory, Tasmania, the same. Northern Territory are now drafting legislation for extended care to 21. And Queensland have picked it up at 19, and we're quite optimistic with the noises coming out of Queensland for them also to actually move to 21. So, that's why it's important. And now, what's interesting, and what's really exciting, is we've got more than 1,000 young people are now enjoying extended care to 21, enjoying all the benefits of security. And we expect by Christmas, that number will be sitting around 1,800, and we expect by the middle of the year, we'll be up around the 2,500, 3,000. Young people now enjoying extended care to 21. How would it work? Well, we want to know, it's a pretty simple system. Here's my current placement. I could be in foster or kinship. I could be in resi or lead tenant. You might have lead tenant here, which is sort of like independent, sort of supported independent, or those who have left the care system already, who have ended up homeless. Well, I can have my foster and kinship placement with the worker and the carer agreed by the young person, the carer. If they both agreed, just continue on through to 21. Or I might say, you know, that's been good, but I reckon I'm ready to go out on my own. And so some, as you see in the United States, some foster care kids, not all, maybe a third of those, so 2/3 would travel here, but about a third would go into a supervised living arrangement. Very similar to a kid in resi who doesn't have an adult that they're living with, because group care requires them to leave at 18. They can't remain in that residential placement, move to a supervised independent living arrangement. What does that look like? Well, just quickly at this. So the subsidy to the foster and kinship care, look, I'll use rough figures, for the Victorian legislation, is $15,000 a year. So the carer will continue to receive $15,000 a year to care for that child for their 18th, their 19th and 20th year. However, if the kid, say 19 and a half, says, thanks foster care mum and dad, that's been great, but I'm ready to go out on my own, that money then moves with the kid to guarantee that we're still caring for the kid, the system's caring for the kid to 21. So that money, which works out to be about 12,000 rather than 15, moves with the kid to help establish this placement here. All along, there's a worker here and a worker still supporting them. So we're really continuing the raising effort. If they're in residential care, the kid through the worker will get a 12,000 a year support package as well, that they can choose between the worker and the kid how that's spent, can be spent on anything, and also the worker and also some brokerage. And then for those who have left, if the child has been in care and can show they've been in care and they've found, I'm out, I'm going to go and see mum and dad, it all collapses. We've seen 100 stories like that, haven't we? No, bugger the care system, I can't wait to get out. Good on you. Let's hope it goes well. And many of them returned saying it all fell flat. Dad was yelling again, mum was there, I wasn't wanted. Come back to the care system. What does the care system do at the moment? Well, under these arrangements, it says, okay, well, you're in extended care and we'll move you into this arrangement through to 21. So that we understand 18, 19, 20-year-olds will try it out there but we'll still need the care of the parent in that regard to go on. So that's how it simply works. And we've got 1,000 kids in these arrangements now, and we expect about 2,500 by the middle, 3,000 by the middle next year. So, this is a bit of polling. A bit of polling. Homestretch won this prize in which they did polling. And look, you know, this is important too. Are the community on board with this type of thinking? Are the community aware? And I've forgotten, it was one of the main pollsters in the country, interviewed 3,000 and asked them 6 questions. And I've got 4 of them here. But basically, believe all young people deserve a place they call at least to 21, 87%. Believe it's harder to move out of home now than 20 years ago, 75%. And ain't that the truth? Support challenging the system to allow young people to remain in care till 21, 75%. And believe the government should be responsible for young people leaving foster care post 18, 83%. So even the community are on board with this. So the young person wants it. Talk to any of them. They want it. They don't want the empty promises, the vacuous sort of statements of leaving care. They want certainty and security. They don't say they want extended care, but they want to know where they're going. And they want to know that it's a certain path for them in that regard. Given many 17-year-olds, they're in the here and now. They want what they've got at the moment to continue. That's how often many of them will describe. And so that gives sort of, in a sense of where even the community feel this type of thinking's up to. And so we've got plenty of supporters on board and plenty of people thinking this is a no-brainer. But let me finish with the no-brainer. A number of people said 6 out of 8 Australian states, Paul. Gee, you know what? Why has it taken so long with such an obvious sense of facts and stats? That's the story. Why it's taken it so long, 4 or 5 years of campaigning. Well, child welfare systems in the country, and I was running one, are highly conservative. They are probably the most conservative human service systems. Now, NDIS has flipped over disability. There's a range of reform going on in mental health. But the child protection system that you're looking now is pretty much generally the same child protection system you saw 15 or 20 years ago. It is a very conservative system of care. Oh, minister, what's the expression? When they, very brave minister. You know, that's the expression, don't do it, because this can get you on the front page of paper. Well, extended care hasn't got any minister on the front page of the paper except in celebration. The minister in Victoria called it his most significant political, in his life, his most significant political moment. West Australia Premier talked about, if I was going to look back on what legacies that I've offered my community at the time during the election, extending care will be one of them. I mean, this is what we're talking about. This is in a sense saying, well, it certainly moves government, but we are up for, don't think that those stats, facts, or anything like that will go, oh, Minister Henskins, Premier Perrottet, oh yeah, of course, we'll do that. We have to, as a group, continue to present the folly of the current system and the chance, because that's really, at the end of the day, our role, my role running my own agency, my job is to create chance for my young people. Create chance and luck. And this is a way, because we've all had our share of chance and luck growing up, and I think part of my delegated responsibilities for the kids I've got under a care, is there 400 or 500 of them each night, is to create chance and luck. And we've got to make a system set up, built, that promotes chance and luck, that creates those opportunities for those young people. You can't do it by being lucky. You make luck happen. And that is, you extend care to 21 and sit back and watch the young people pay you back in spades. How they actually start to stride, how they feel more confident from a care system of often hell to actually feeling like the state is actually supporting me on my way to go. So that's our job this morning, in the sense of thinking about how we continue to present to the New South Wales government that this is a reform that we need to adopt here. Not for us as as you know, custodians of the system, not for the carers of the good, generous heart, but yes as well, but for the young people themselves. So, all right. Thanks, Liz. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. For a New South Wales government that prides itself on evidence-based policy, I'm pretty convinced. The research is there, the financial modelling is there, it makes absolute sense, and we're paying for it tenfold in other ways if we don't get this right. So for me, I'm going to put my own little anecdotes in. As principal officer, I sign off on leaving care plans that go to the department. So we're working really hard to improve the way that we do those plans in conjunction, do them really well. So we put up a really comprehensive leaving care plan. We'd consulted with the young person. Well, not consulted, we supported them to lead the planning process. Put up a really comprehensive, very compliant leaving care plan. It went to the Director Community Services. Came back with red pen all over it. This person who didn't know this kid from a bar of soap decided that they didn't really need all the things that we'd put in the plan, and that if any time in the future perhaps this young person might need that, they will consider it. But they didn't endorse the plan. How do we go back to that young person and tell them that? The program's broken. Okay. So our next speaker, Dr. Susan Badwari, is a senior lecturer in the Department of Social Work at Monash University. She also holds a Discovery Early Career Research Award Fellowship from the Australian Research Council for research focusing on crossover children at the nexus of child protection and youth justice systems. She has over a decade of research experience collaborating on research, evaluations and reviews with a range of government and non-government stakeholders, including the Australian Institute of Family Studies, the Victorian Commission for Children and Young People, Adult Corrections in Victoria and New South Wales, and Anglicare Australia. She's authored over 50 peer-reviewed academic articles, book chapters and commissioned reports in the areas of child protection, out-of-home care, youth and adult criminal justice. Welcome.
This is working? Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Hi everyone. I'd just like to begin by paying my respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nations, and this is also my first time on a plane to come up here in like 2.5 years or more, so it's very exciting to be here, and it was wonderful to hear the speakers that have spoken so far. So I'm pretty much going to extend on what has been said already, but really trying to unpick this, the details and the nitty-gritty of the legislation and policy here. And you would think this would be a boring exercise, but it's not. So I want to cover some of what so my initial involvement with Paul in the Homestretch campaign came in 2016 when Paul commissioned us to have a look at the legislation and policy that was in place at that time all around Australia and also overseas. So I just want to touch on what we found from that review and then really keep on going on what is the difference here between leaving care and extended care. These are not the same things, and I'm devastated to hear they're being confused because it's not at all the same thing. Then we're going to move on to having a look at what the current New South Wales post-care provisions are, really picking them apart in detail and showing how they do not at all meet even what the New South Wales government itself says it owes to care leavers. Then finally, looking at what the kind of reforms might look like in the Australian context and the New South Wales context. So let's look at the definitions here. So what's post-care support? It's where a government-funded professionals support and brokerage to young people who have left out-of-home care. It's after the person is gone. They're well and truly gone. In contrast, extended care is about extending care arrangements beyond 18 years. As Paul said, it's about maintaining that relationship. It's not about severing it. It's exactly the opposite. But it's also about that support comprising guaranteed support for accommodation alongside those other provisions, so funding, other support, casework, brokerage. They're two separate concepts and they shouldn't be conflated. So Oh, that didn't work out very well. So that's just the actual review that we conducted in 2016. But at that time, what we saw was that no Australian jurisdiction had anything that could be called extended care at that time. Not that long ago, 5 years ago, right? And yet we've seen all the changes that have happened since. So it really happened quite quickly. All the post-care provisions that were in place across every jurisdiction at that time were discretionary. They could be provided, they didn't have to be provided. 5 jurisdictions at that time had the power to deliver post-care support that were enshrined in legislation, but the rest of them, it was just some kind of policy provision. So nothing really serious, no commitment, right? Then finally, there was already much discrepancy between Australian states and territories. We see there is still, but it's getting more on par, with the exception really at the moment of New South Wales being kind of the outlier, which is a real shame. And I mean, a big part of the reason why I've been so on board with what the Homestretch campaign is trying to do is because social justice and all that stuff, and very important to me. I was myself involved in the child protection system growing up, which Paul probably doesn't even know, but I've had that experience. I know what it is to come through hardship and everything else, and yes, there's very much a personal connection to that story, but as a researcher, I'm about the evidence. It's not just about caring, it's about caring and marrying that with what's the evidence. Why we do, and so to have evidence-based policy, we should have evidence-based policy in social areas of all of our communities just as much as we might demand it in a health perspective. The fact that we do not rely on evidence to the same extent, we can just go willy-nilly making a policy which is completely not based in the current evidence, is really quite disturbing. We know that this is not what works, and we continue to do it. Even at that time, Australia was already far behind international jurisdictions, as Paul said. US, even some parts of Canada, UK, far behind. So can you imagine what it is now, 5 years on? They've already started trials and implementing it in residential care contexts, and we're still arguing about whether kids deserve a house. It's just not, it's not grounded in the current evidence. So what did it look like in Victoria back then, 2016? It was this business of the secretary has a responsibility to arrange services, to assist the young person to 21, but it was all about gaining the capacity for independence. It was like nothing, they specifically said, I found this very disturbing to read in legislation in the state where I come from, that it does not create or confer on any person any right or entitlement enforceable at law. So just in case you thought you had a right to some security as an 18-year-old, well, just make sure that you know that you don't. And then it listed the kind of services that they might provide, that they could provide. They didn't have to provide, but they might provide. So what are we talking about here? It's discretionary support. It's what we call permissive support. It's not required, it's not a right, it's not an obligation, it's not mandatory. May provide at the discretion of, and Paul loves these words, we call them weasel words. They're about why we don't have to give things, may be given, may assist, as the minister considers necessary. So these permissive powers did not create any obligation or mandate to support care leavers. It looked like there was something there on paper, and maybe there was. And we think, well, why does this really matter? If the kid gets the support, if the young person gets the support at the end of the day, why does it matter? It matters because what this looks like, and all of you who have worked in practice will know this, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, it matters because of what it looks like on the ground. It matters because of the anxiety you put a kid through, wondering whether they're going to get the support. Not when they're 18, you put this worry in their head when they are 15, when they are 14, when they should be thinking about developing, creating relationships, healing the trauma of the past, going to school. They're worrying about whether they're going to be homeless when they turn 18. Every moment that you waste with a care worker, a caseworker, having to fill out form after form after form, having to fight to try and get this support, is a moment not spent building relationships, healing trauma, getting into education. It's about creating more instability through our systems rather than creating the stability we're saying that we're aiming to reverse. It makes no sense even on the most basic of logical levels. So what did international continuing care provisions look at that time? As Paul said, the UK language was very directive. It said, you must provide. It is the duty. The US had the extension of the eligibility to stay in care, or even that safety net of being able to come back if things didn't work out. As we would all provide if it was for our own kids, and we could, if we had the means to. It's a no-brainer, right? New Zealand, again, this language, entitled to be supported, to live with a caregiver at any time, from any period, from the age of 18 years up to 21, and may request to do so at any time. Very stark difference to, we might give you some brokerage, we might give you some casework. Maybe, hopefully, we can maybe help you find a house, maybe sometime. All of these things required legislative change, but they were all based on the agreement of the young person and the carers. We've had some arguments about, well, you can't force people to stay in care, but no one's suggesting that we do that. We're all suggesting this is all in agreement, it's voluntary, it's not required, no one's pushing anything on anyone. So what does it look like in New South Wales at the moment? It's governed by one piece of legislation and referenced in 2 pieces of policy. So I'm not going to do this in too much detail, don't worry. But I want to point out these words. So New South Wales post-care legislative provisions covered in section 165 of the Act, again, is to provide or arrange for such assistance as the minister considers necessary. So at some point, someone is making a decision about what supports a young person must provide, rather than saying, they all deserve this support. They all need this support. Every young person does. Appropriate assistance may include one of these things, but based on assessment of need. Minister has a discretion also to continue. So nothing here is saying anything in the realm of this is guaranteed, this is open to every kid and young person. Again, going into the policy provisions, section 3 of the guidelines says that that's about care planning. These are what's accessible around information, referral, counselling support. But this is where, again, there's an assessment of need, and the need must be unable to be sufficiently met by universal services. What that means is we have to go through a process of it failing to be met before we will then provide it. So we're waiting for something to break before we offer the support. We're not just providing it as a guaranteed means. Again, in section 4 of the guidelines, there's an assessment to determine whether various supports may be available. Not guaranteed whatsoever. And the financial assistance, when we go and look at the payments, they, again, needs-based, may be paid. If the young person would be at risk of homelessness, and if we talk to any parent in the Australian community today, any parent that had the means to provide, would they only provide support to their child and young person at the age of 18 if that child was at risk of homelessness? Is that the threshold? Is that the bar? Do we wait for that to happen before we go, yeah, we might support you? It's quite extreme. When you look at it in the nitty-gritty detail, you can see how extreme it is. We're waiting for things to break. And we've always talked in social policy, there's these constant talk about early intervention. Early intervention. We talk about that all the time. We don't want to wait for things to break. But this is where the starting point is. This is where the legislation and policy that underpins what we do actually doesn't implement those processes. It doesn't build that early intervention, common sense framework into the way we deliver things. So again, these things, the aftercare allowance, needs-based to bridge the gap. There's an admission there that there is a gap. And then for a 3-month period, reviewable at that time, may be eligible. Contingency payments. Other things have to have been explored first. So again, we're making workers, young people, go around. Where's the information? Where's the form? How long do I have to wait to hear back? This is not something that allows a smooth and stable process for young people. Education and training may be provided. Legal advice may be provided. Finding employment may be provided. Maybe. So I hope what I'm trying to show you there through all that is that it doesn't create any enforceable right. The current legislative and policy provisions certainly not to housing and certainly not to post-care support in any frame. Everything that we see there is discretionary and it's episodic. So it's discretionary, meaning it's not guaranteed to all care leavers. Everything has to be based on an assessed need. We're making people go through all these processes, and episodic meaning, again, it starts and it stops, and it starts and it stops. And it looks like it's there, but when we look at that from the lived experience of people on the ground, you're talking about disruption. Everything there is really disrupted. So again, can we call this mandatory support? Absolutely not. I hope we've picked out the part enough. Have we picked a part enough? May include, as the Minister considered, would be at risk of homelessness. Optional powers. No mandate to support care leavers, no entitled to support, no guaranteed housing. And this is the key part for me. In a lot of respects, you have to have demonstrated unsuccessful attempts. If you have to be unsuccessful before we'll support you, you're waiting for a problem to happen. To me, that doesn't make sense. It's wasteful. It's wasteful of resources. And it's also against everything we know about supporting child development, about healing trauma, about helping people become connected to services, community, relationship. We're waiting for disruption to occur and then we're jumping in. It's a backwards kind of way of thinking. It's not forward thinking and it's not based on the evidence. This will generate barriers for the young people with the most complex support needs. It generates barriers for everyone, but the worst will be for those young people that have the most complex needs, without a doubt. Those young people will often see this kind of stuff and went, well, you don't want me anyway. You don't want to help me anyway. I'm not even going to bother. I'm not even going to bother. And it requires a child protection to begin preparing a young person, as I said before, to leave as early as 15 years. They shouldn't even be thinking about this. No child should be thinking about this. It shouldn't be something that we're putting in their heads at that young age. They should be free to be experiencing some sense of stability, some sense of security. Judy Cashmore, who a lot of you would know of, she's like a leaving care researcher and policy advocate in New South Wales, and her research showed that the fundamental thing that determined what outcomes were for young people was their sense of felt security, if they felt secure. And that's a problem when we put these kinds of policies in place. They are not those that are going to support young people to feel secure. And we all know the impact of that in terms of like the way a young person's brain functions. When you've had that history of trauma, we're on the fight and flight mode there. We don't have free access to the other parts of ourselves that let us feel safe to do all that healing work, to do all that educational work, to feel safe to go out and meet new friends and make those connections and do everything we need to do to have a healthy, prosperous life. So we can definitely say that what's in place currently in New South Wales falls far short of meeting the very conditions that are outlined in the department's own Care Leaver Charter of Rights, which clearly states, don't make us fight for aftercare support. I think what we've seen there is 100% making children, young people, and their advocates, whether they be foster carers, whether they be caseworkers, fight for that support. It's not a given. So what would the path forward look like? So again, what's currently being offered? Care reimbursements, discretionary. Casework, discretionary. Accommodation, none. Brokerage, none. Extended care is about universally offering these things to 21 years. That's the difference. It's not the same thing at all. Universally offering it, not making you jump through hoops. It's just there. You don't have to worry. It's just there. So I'm not going to go over this because Paul did, but just to say that in every state and territory since that we did our 2016 review, some kind of level of reform has been pushed forward around extended and continuing care, with the very exception of New South Wales, who have not made any commitment to extend care to 21 years. I just want to show what the Victorian bill looked like. This passed in Victoria just last week, so yay, exciting. But the language there, let's have a look. The Secretary has a responsibility to provide or arrange out-of-home care to a young person aged 18 years or above, but under 21 years of age, if the young person elects to remain in out-of-home care, and the Secretary has had parental responsibility. So you're talking about a responsibility there. And then may enter into an agreement with that young person with respect to the care of that young person. So that key language there about the responsibility. So what might it look like in New South Wales? There's a whole bunch of different approaches that Paul outlined that might be appropriate for here. But really what we're talking about is a proactive approach rather than waiting for things to fall apart. Ensuring that entitlement to ongoing supports, natural extension of the out-of-home care system, and putting New South Wales basically on par with other Australian jurisdictions and internationally. Again, your different approaches for legislative amendment might be about extending the age threshold for guardianship on a voluntary basis, an obligation to provide continuing care legislated, or providing for voluntary arrangements between young people and carers beyond 18 years. But that just brings me to the end of what I wanted to share today. Just to say that this is still inconsistent. And to leave New South Wales where it currently is means that there's a huge discrepancy with what young people are getting in New South Wales and what they're going to be getting elsewhere in Australia. And it's just, that in itself is unfair, but it's also, again, not based in the evidence. Most Australian jurisdictions have implemented something and New South Wales remains lagging behind, but we feel very hopeful that we'll get there in the end. We'll get there in the end, just it's a matter of time. Thanks, everybody.
And again, unfortunately, hopeful. And so I hope you're thinking about the kinds of actions you can make personally, but also go back to your organisation about how we campaign to get something very different here in New South Wales. I think the other thing I took away from Susan was I'm going to go back to my team and say, how are we going to make sure the 300 children and young people we have in our foster care and post-care programs have that sense of felt security? Because I'm pretty sure most of them don't have that. Okay, so we're going to have morning tea now. Are we still up? We're a little bit behind. 15 minutes? Yep. Okay, great. Morning tea outside. Keep talking and thinking about what you can take away in terms of commitments today. 15 minutes, so about 5 past? 5:10 past?
Green is good. Turn it on.
Hey, 1, 2.
I've got a few different things. Beautiful. Yeah. Okay. Thanks everyone for coming back. Hope you enjoyed morning tea and lots of great conversation over coffee and pastries. Now, we're really keen and excited to be able to introduce this next presenter and hear about this information. So, Dr. Tom McLean is Research and Social Policy Program Head at Uniting. Tom leads evaluations of Uniting's practices and services, research into aspects of disadvantage and vulnerability, and social policy analysis. Tom's team led the development of the extended care model, which Uniting is currently piloting, and is managing the independent evaluation. And there's an independent evaluation being undertaken by NOUS. Prior to joining Uniting, Tom worked in evaluation policy and investigation roles in the New South Wales Government and in the finance sector in London. So welcome, Tom. We're very excited. We've been looking forward to Tom presenting this information for a while, so it's fabulous.
It's difficult to hear if this thing's on. Can you guys hear me okay? Great, good. Thank you for the invitation. I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. It's nice to be on Gadigal land and not Gamigal land, where I spent most of the last year on Zoom. And also my colleagues from Uniting who are here, who are making this even more real than it is for me. This is something I'm really proud to be involved in. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story about the extended care pilot that we are conducting here in Uniting, and it's part of the story that you've heard all morning. We've heard about how there is a really important moral case for every single young person who leaves care to have the sort of support that people who aren't in care get. We've heard that the legislation is really not set up to enable that, and we are here to show you that actually all of this stuff is real on the ground in New South Wales. We're proving it with our pilot, and we'd love for this to be adopted in some form right across New South Wales for every young person who's in care. So this is about showing what it's like really on the ground. I want to start a little bit about why it is that we decided to undertake this. And as you can see, there are really two reasons why we decided at Uniting to put our money where our mouth is. One is that, as many of you will know, we're a large provider of out-of-home care and of what's currently called aftercare supports in New South Wales. And all of the problems that you heard about earlier today for young people in those systems, we saw all the time. So our experience showed us that this thing was essential. And the second thing is that we realised that we had a moral duty to do something about this, that we were part of a system that was fundamentally about trying to solve past problems in a piecemeal way for the young people who were empowered enough to ask. And that was basically a fraying patchwork quilt that really wasn't providing anyone with any warmth, despite the fact that all the people actually working in the services were doing their level best. The system itself was the problem. And we realised that as an organisation that held itself up as having some sort of a moral foundation, we needed to do something about this, and so that's what we're doing. We developed what we thought at the time was a new model of support. We've now learned that there are lots of other places like Stepping Stone House doing very similar things. We're piloting it, we're evaluating it independently through NOUS, as you heard, and we're funding it ourselves. And we think that the results of this pilot, even to date, show that it's a sensible investment for the New South Wales Government, in addition to being a moral imperative. The model we're piloting is actually very, very similar to what we've heard about earlier today. There are two main components to it. One is that we offer ongoing support to all of the young people in our care who were in our care in a particular period through to age 21, as of right. They don't need to ask, we offer it. They can stay with their carers if they wish, or they can live independently and we'll support them. And in addition to that, we provide a youth development coach, which is an ongoing relationship that starts from 15 years of age, and it's not about preparing for leaving care. It's about helping young people decide who they want to grow up as, what they'd like to do, where would you like to be, what do you want to study. And it's okay to change your mind as part of that. In fact, I think I'm looking around here and I'm guessing if you guys are anything like me, relatively advantaged, most of us, and we changed our minds in our 20s all the time. So it's all about helping people discover and explore and become who they want to be. Crucially, from our point of view, three things you can see on the right there.
It's a coaching model that works alongside PSP caseworkers. This is not an additional layer of responsibility for a group of people who are already overworked and whose focus is fundamentally on compliance. And it uses the advantage thinking model, which we're also using in our FOIA Central transitional accommodation service that many of you will have heard of. And you can see some of the features of it there. So that's what we're piloting. We know this works because NSW have been evaluating it for about 2.5 years, getting on for 3 years now, and the early results that they're showing are already incredibly positive. And in a few moments, I'm going to stop talking and hand over to one of my colleagues and a young person who's actually going through the program, and you'll hear about what that feels like. You can see here on the left the objectives of the evaluation, and you can see the kind of domains that we're looking at in assessing whether it works. Are young people better off in terms of their education, their employment, their health and well-being, their connection to friends and family and community, and their ability to live independently in their housing? And you can see one of all the list of things that we're intending to do with these findings on the left there, many of which we're already doing through our advocacy and government relations work. The evaluators at the end of the first year of the evaluation came to us and said, we've never seen a program that's been as effective over such a short period of time as this. It really, really does work. All of the things you've heard about earlier today, about what should work in theory or about what's working well overseas, it's working on the ground here in New South Wales. The participants in the program are now more confident across all 5 of the domains. They believe the program is having a meaningful impact on their lives and would recommend it to others. And the coaches feel the same when we speak to them. And you can see on the right that there are early signs of significant improvements in social and economic outcomes, a greater sense of control. Everyone has crises, but the crises are dealt with quickly and are less likely to have ongoing negative consequences. And the young people who we talk to are more positive about their engagement in the domains you can see at the top. This is simply a screen cap from the sorts of reports that NSW give us from their independent evaluation. And the reason I've got it up here is to let you know that there's an awful lot of detail behind what I've been talking to you about today, and we're very happy to share this. I've deliberately kept it schematic because for us the independence of what NSW is doing is really important. This isn't us singing the praises of a program for ourselves. This is independent and this is rigorous. So if you'd like to know more, there's an awful lot of detail behind it that we're very happy to share. There are a couple of ways forward for us in this. One of them is that we're obviously going to be continuing the evaluation. There are at least 2 years to go on the program. And we're now moving into the phase where we've got enough longitudinal data to start doing things like comparing the costs of social care, social expenditure at the state level for the young people in our care and for the average young person who's been through the care system to demonstrate the net effect of the program. So some serious and rigorous social and economic quantitative analysis, cost-benefit analysis using linked data, in addition to the ongoing evaluation that's understanding the experience for the people in the program. The second thing is that we're keen to spread the message about this, and that's why we're part of Homestretch, but we're also doing it under our own steam as well. There are a lot of myths, as we've already heard today, about the adequacy of existing supports and why we don't need to do more, and they are flat out not true. And we believe that this is not just a good idea, but as Paul mentioned earlier before, this is a sound investment on the part of the New South Wales government. Those of you who know Uniting know that social impact investment is one of the things we do a lot of. This is a compelling case behind the scenes, and if you're interested in information on that, please reach out because I'm happy to talk your ear off about that. And we're meeting with MPs, working through Homestretch and other partners to spread the news about this. So we're at a point in time where we've found that it's an incredibly effective program. All of the stories you've heard today are real and on the ground, and really it's just up to the state government to decide that this is a sensible decision to make. For us, it's a lay down misere case. I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague Kim to come and speak with a very nervous Lani, but please come up, have a seat here, you're going to be fine. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Kim. I'm the program manager of the Extended Care Pilot, and it has been an amazing almost 3 years for me to be able to. I was able to be at the start, and initially it was just a business plan, and I have been part of this amazing program. And if you really want to talk to me, like I really regret that I didn't get a chance to talk, but I would talk off your ears and would literally talk for hours and hours because I'm so passionate and committed by this pilot. Beside Lani, I also have Viljami. So Viljami has been Lani's youth development coach from the start of the pilot. So we initially started in April 2019, and Lani has also been part of the pilot since the start. And so I'm not going to talk, but I really would like to introduce Lani today. And yes, it's the first time. She had a couple of weeks ago a meeting with Kate Washington, and she did absolutely amazing. No pressure. Make her all feel very welcome. So I might just hand over to Lani, and I'm going to ask her a couple of questions to just make her feel more comfortable and to kind of help us steer in the direction that we want to go to. But Lani, is there anything that you would like to share about yourself?
Can you hear me? Yep. Okay, so I'm 18 right now, and I'm in the middle of my HSC. So be grateful that I'm here because I could be studying right now. But yes, and I'm also very passionate about stuff like this, especially when it comes to helping children, and I also have university offers to become a social worker. So but yes, I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Lani. I might just start off with the first question, and that's why we've also got Viljami sitting here. But would you like to tell the people in the audience what your relationship has been like with Viljami?
Okay, so I have a very genuine connection with my YDC. He's like an uncle to me, like a brotherly uncle, you could say. Where we've got a very close relationship, and I can rely on him with anything. I could talk to him about anything. He's one of the biggest support people I have in my life, which I'm very grateful for. And he's helped me through so many things since I've met him, from like getting my driver's license to just being there to talk about my emotions and things that I'm going through, especially when I can't talk to anyone else about it. So yeah.
So just adding on to the thing that Lani was saying with the driving license. So we're lucky that Uniting actually has a driving program, and the Extended Care Pilot became part of that, which gave our youth development coaches the opportunity, because again, you know, young people that are 17, 18, a lot of the carers might be slightly older or might not have the opportunity to provide the young people with a chance to go and drive on the road, or might not feel comfortable about it. So that's why our youth development coaches took that initiative to drive with young people on the road, which hasn't always been easy for the last 2 years with COVID. But Lani did get her driving license, and I think Lani and Viljami spent hundreds of hours together in the car talking to each other, and that's probably also where they really built their bond. Like Viljami was at the point very, very emotional because he felt like he had a breakthrough when Lani was telling him stories. The next question, and this is maybe a little bit of tricky one, but I just wanted to ask, so she's already mentioned the help and support she's received from Viljami over the last 2 years and a half, but I also just really wanted to question and ask Lani what she thinks the difference is between a caseworker that provides support until the age of 18 and her youth development coach.
Okay, so to me, there is a huge difference between a YDC and a caseworker. I didn't really, okay, how do I put this? My relationship with my caseworker was very, like, didn't feel like I had a connection with them at all. It was kind of just like, I'm a part of the system, you have to do this. There's a lot of casework we have to do. And then as soon as I was 18, it was like, didn't even see them anymore. But compared to my YDC, we were able to build a connection so that I was actually confident. I was able to open up about things, and now that we do goal setting and stuff like that, things that will help me in the future and get ready for life, which I'm actually glad to do and I'm actually looking forward to do sometimes, because of that connection that we built. Whereas with the caseworkers, it's very much just you sit there, you talk about work. It's just their work, their job, stuff like that, which just feels a bit awkward, and you know, you just want to get it over with. Whereas if you actually have that connection like the YDCs do, it's much easier to do things and to do things. Sorry.
Thank you, Lani. That's amazing. Very important question to ask. Being part of the extended care pilot, so how did you feel when you turned 18? Because a lot of young people feel very anxious when they turn 18 because they don't have any support. So what was your feeling when you turned 18?
I had zero anxiety in me, because I knew that I had the support from the program and everything. Whereas I knew that if I didn't have that, I would have just... There's a lot of skills and a lot of lessons that Viliami has taught me that I couldn't learn from other places, because either my carers were too busy or because my caseworkers doesn't really deal with that type of stuff. So I would literally be living by myself right now, either in Foyer Central or some random place, struggling if it wasn't for Viliami, who showed me the pros and cons and everything, and then that's what helped me to realize I wasn't ready. And so, yeah, when I turned 18, I knew that he would have my back, and so I wasn't worried about, I knew I wasn't going to get kicked out or anything, but I knew that if I had moved out, I would still have his back. And so I've got the biggest mind blank. But yes, the point is, I was not worried about anything. I knew I had support from a lot of people, not just Viliami, but everyone involved in the program. And so I knew what I was getting into, and I was comfortable and I was confident moving on in life, and I knew that I was going to continue getting that support until at least the pilot was finished. So I'm really grateful and I'm really happy about that.
Thank you, Lani. That was great. So just to give a bit of context, when Lani turned 18 and 4 years started up, which is another really great program that Uniting recently started up, Lani was very keen to move into 4 year, but I think because she was in the middle of her HSCs, we sat down with the carers and we had a very open conversation. And that's when Lani realized, like, I'm actually not in a bad place. I've got great carers and I can stay here as long as I want. But it might have been a total different ball game if that support wasn't there and if she didn't have anyone to unpack that with. Also, just really adding to that, we've got about 57 young people currently still in the program. Initially, we had about 60, but we had a couple of young people that decided to take a different journey. But what is really incredible, and Lani just mentioned it as well, she doesn't only feel supported to her YDC, she feels supported by the whole program. We have young people moving to Queensland. We have young people that make their way from Dubbo to Sydney or Dubbo to, we've got a young person moving next week to Nowra to be back connected with family. But what is very important, that none of those young people will fall without support. Even though they're based in Queensland, we might not see them physically, but we're still there for them, and we regularly follow up with phone calls with them. We will have a Sydney team that goes to Nowra to, even though their initial YDCs might be based in Dubbo, young people are connected to any of the YDCs. So as Jason was saying, we might not take young people on wilderness camps, but we did opportunities for young people. Like we had a mini conference earlier this year. Create Foundation was involved in it as well, to train young people to become advocates and youth leaders for our cause. But I think that was an incredible opportunity for meeting all the other YDCs in the program, and also to meet other young people. And some young people never really met someone else that was in care, and it was really, really great. And young people really built incredible connections with other young people, also with YDCs, which gave them that opportunity. So wherever they move, they can fall back on other YDCs, or they know that they will always receive that support until the age of 21. I just want to end up with one more question for Lani. So being part of this conference today, as a young person, what would be your message to our New South Wales government?
Well, I'm not too sure what to say, but it's a bit frustrating, and it is very confusing that, the extended care and this home stretch isn't actually a thing yet. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole point of foster care is to provide a safe environment for young people who come out of trauma, suffering, unsafe placements, and yet they put them in these situations, in these foster placements, and cut them off at 18. And a lot of people turn to substance abuse. A lot of people end up in jail and prison, and a lot of people turn up homeless. And that, to me, is just as bad as being in their previous unsafe placement. So it's very confusing, and I don't get why you say we're going to provide a safe place and then do that. Like, it's very contradicting, but that's all from me.
Thank you, Lani. Thank you, everyone.
Really well done, and I'm always inspired when I hear young people talk about their lived experience, and they're just so insightful and articulate, and it's really powerful and motivating, and I wish more people who had the decision making and the influence were in the room to hear what you had to say, because it's just so important. So thank you. Right, a bit of a change of tack now. We're going to, just when you thought Zoom was, a thing of the past, it's not. I thought you'd be, missing it. So we're going to have a session, an online session now, and we're going to hear from two other jurisdictions, and they're going to share their journey, I guess, as inspiration for us around how we formulate our next steps. So we've got Deb Sabaris, who's the CEO of the Centre for Excellence in Child and Family Welfare. The centre is Victoria's peak body for child and family services. Deb is a passionate advocate for Victoria's vulnerable children, young people and families. Deb has over 32 years' experience in the not-for-profit and public sector and has held executive positions in organisations working across youth services, disability, homelessness, drug and alcohol support services and employment programs. Prior to joining the centre, Deb held senior executive positions in state government. We've also got Mark Glasson. Mark is the CEO of Anglicare Western Australia and the State Chair of Homestretch. Mark has over 25 years' experience across a range of human services, which includes service delivery to families and children, community development, public policy and services to offenders. He has held senior executive positions in Government of Western Australia and has also worked in local government and community organisations. So, we start with Deb. Thank you, Deb. You're on mute, Deb. Wouldn't be a Zoom session without that, would it?
I can see a lot of backs.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Deb.
Okay, fantastic. So look, I mean, I'd just like to begin by saying how fortunate we feel here in Victoria to have had the long journey of fully implementing extending care to 21. I was saying to Mark the other day that we now here have just introduced legislation to legislate extending care. The Home Stretch campaign, it seems easy, right? Like we've done it in Victoria, but it's taken quite a few years, led by Paul McDonald, who was the then chair of my board, and the peak body as a sort of a duo. And we've worked very hard, as you do, with the opposition and the government to have them realise why this was really important. I'd have to say legislating it for us is the cherry on the cake, because then from our perspective it means that it's enshrined in law as a right for all children who've been in care. I'm not going to go through, as you would all know, the reasons why this is important. But you'd be hard-pressed in Victoria now to find a young person who doesn't know about extending care, doesn't talk about extending care, and doesn't see it as one of the most significant things that will impact their life positively over the term of their young lives. And there are many kids who didn't have the benefit of extended care and talk fairly publicly about what it would have meant to their lives. For the ministers involved here in Victoria, particularly Luke Donnellan, it was a bit of a no-brainer. We had a slow start where we had some kids, small number of kids involved in the pilot, but now at the recent budget it was extended to all children. And here in Victoria, it's extended to all children with whatever placement type they are in, whether it's residential care, kinship care, or foster care. And we worked hard to make sure that all kids have the access. So from our perspective, we really don't understand what's holding other states back. We understand why pilots are important, but here in Victoria, we now know that every child who's been in care at 18 will have full access to services and supports. And we hope to see many, many less kids in our homelessness services, in our youth justice services, and go on to have fabulous lives. So I suppose in Victoria, I've said to Mark, and Paul knows this only too well, it wasn't a fait accompli. We still had to fight for it and fight for it pretty hard. $65 million over 4 years, not to be sniffed at, but certainly for me, it's not a lot of money in the scheme of things. We're building a lot of stuff here in Victoria, so it's a small amount of money in comparison to some of the stuff we're building. I think that's enough from me, but I'd have to say for those that are in the room today, and for all political parties in New South Wales, just do it. Do this. It will change lives, and we can't look after these kids for a period of time and then sort of decide that we don't want to do it once they turn 18. It's actually just wrong. We're really thrilled to say it's one thing we can tick off the bucket list here in Victoria.
Thanks, Deb. Paul McDonald here. How you going? I'll turn to you and then there, but and I'll come to you in a minute, Mark, and I might just tease out one or two other questions, Deb, if I can, for you to tell the audience. Though Victoria's got this, it took about 4 years of persistence, and New South Wales in the same, and in a sense, sort of, at times it felt like we weren't getting anywhere like in New South Wales. So I'm just wondering what's to this audience. What's the advice or the tips you'd give to all the different representatives in this room who are representing an organisation or an interest or that? to say keep going, and what are some of the techniques that you would encourage them to take on to get a government over the line?
From our perspective, and Paul would know this, we came at this from a number of perspectives. So in Victoria, we have very close ties to central agencies, not just to the Minister, who's responsible for this portfolio. And the arguments for Homestretch were very compelling in terms of the cost-benefit argument. So Treasury officials and central agencies are always very interested in good policy, good, sound, clear, crisp policy, and interested in cost-benefit analysis. And both of those, and I know all of you have this, both of that is very clear when it comes to Homestretch. So whilst we obviously have lots of conversations with ministers responsible, we also have lots of conversations with central agencies. And tackling this at multiple fronts is really, really important. But we really did run a pretty savage campaign. Our minister was not going to do this. And we were told very clearly that she was not going to do this and we should go away. But we just stayed the course, and I think the radio ads that were run were quite, confronting in a way, because they were on the radio all the time, and they were on the radio when mums were picking up their kids from school. So we just stayed the course, but we just didn't stop talking about it, and we had sort of had the courage of our convictions. We knew it was important, and it was almost too hard to turn back. But I'd have to say we got a lot of no's. But when governments are coming up to a budget or an election, these times are pretty important, and we certainly used the state election as a leverage point, and therefore got the sort of first tranche of this announced weeks before the election, and did our damnedest to make sure that we were speaking directly to the Treasurer's office, to the Premier's office, and to the Minister's office. So made this a pretty big deal.
Thanks, Deb. And to you, Mark, and then we'll open up to the room. What's West Australia's journey? What were the things that worked? Because I know, I think you met with the minister 4 or 5 times, so it's not like, yeah. So it's persistent. But just tell us your take on from West Australia 0 to, in fact, universal over that course, and what's sort of some of the feedback you give this audience to New South Wales about that journey? Good on you, Mark. Yeah, it's... Are there questions for Mark? We'll go to Mark first, soon he's got to escape for that very important meeting of rolling it out. But any questions or comments or reflect to Mark? Yeah. Oh, you'll need a microphone, so come up here. Well, I don't think I can hear them.
Yeah, sorry. Does Homestretch and WA plan to further increase care to 25? And could you just talk a bit on that?
Hey, Mark. It's really awkward turning around and seeing you on the screen. Anyway, my question to you was like, so we've been thinking in New South Wales or looking at what approach should we take? Should we look at making the ministers look really good and going for example, young people that are currently in foster care, because that might be the easiest target group to work of, and potentially because we're making really quickly outcomes that could make them look really good in the picture. So I don't know how WA looked at it, whether straight away like we supporting it for young people in foster care, kinship care and resi care, or would we have an approach of looking at young people in resi care first, or do we do it all together and say no, it's should be straight away for all young people in New South Wales? So I just thought to pick your brain and ask you for some advice and guidance on how we could approach it best in New South Wales.
Thanks, Mark. Deb, I might go to you while Mark, I think if you've got to make a polite exit.
I do have to go. Good luck, everyone. I wish you well.
All right, good on you, mate. Thanks, Mark. Deb, would you add any comment to that question?
Look, I think you do have to go where you can get a result. My colleague asked a question about where to go. Like go. You do whatever you can do. Like so, if you can get foster care up, that's massive. Um, we were very surprised, and maybe it's because you know, I mean, everybody supported this in Victoria. Like you had enormous numbers of CEOs. Kids were calling for it at every meeting. Um, and then we were really surprised the department had done the modelling on all children or care types. Um, we wanted that, but it was the department who was so enamoured with it in the end that that internal advocacy started to kick in, which once that starts to happen, then that's pretty exciting. So I would agree with my colleague, go where you can go. And I think once it builds up momentum and you feel like you're getting that momentum, then it will all follow. We're pretty excited it includes kids in Wesi because they really do a tough amount of care. But we didn't expect that, and when we started to see that was what the department were modelling it on, we were pretty excited. But it was just one of those fortunate things. Ministers are really important in this. Our minister didn't realise when he came into the portfolio that not all kids were getting access to extending care, and that really drove him. I mean, he used language like, I was really embarrassed, I didn't realise it wasn't for all kids. So that really drove him, and he's a pretty passionate minister. Um, so this thing, once it got momentum, it just kept rolling. And now I suspect in Victoria, people are looking for the next home stretch. Paul, can we make a comment? You know, why did we wait so long? Like, tell us, sector, what's the next thing you want to try and do? Um, so I think that it isn't just about home stretch; it's about what home stretch represents in terms of solving problems. Paul, I also want to touch on the agency in kids that was just talked about. This singularly has meant that kids feel a little bit more in control of what matters to them. So this campaign means a lot to them, and the way that extended care is rolling out in Victoria means they get some choices about what happens to them. I think it's really important because it's very it's a pretty difficult system within which the kids don't always feel like they've got any control around it, and I think that's probably one of the most exciting things about Homestretch.
Yeah. Another question to Deb. Well, I've got one stored up. So we've got a room of people involved in a whole range of different things, representing a whole range of either service delivery agencies or consumer voice groups or peak groups or whatever. And we know in this area there's a lot of need for a lot of things. There's a Congo line of things that we want to get done. How do you, in the advocacy role, what's the story about, well, for Homestretch and getting that over the line, in the sense of with people, that's one of 4 things I want to get over the line, please, Minister. And what's some of the reflections you've got about that to tell stakeholders who are balancing a range of advocacy issues, yet, this one got over the line, and what was that all about? Thanks.
Yeah. Look, we always get asked, well, you can't have it all. Is this all you want? I mean, we simply got asked the question, if you want Homestretch, that might be all you get. That always happens, and you don't subscribe to that, but you just need to make sure that, I mean, from our perspective, this was one of the most important things to get across the line when you're asked that question about it being a priority. But often advocacy groups get asked, choose the things you want. In the end, in Victoria, we got this plus 1,000 other things. We were very lucky. But I actually think that homestretch in a way, and it is the same in every state, which is why, come on, New South Wales. Actually, the cost benefit in this is so good. I mean, it isn't just, I mean, it actually saves lives and saves money. And so, in a way, it was probably always going to be the top of the list for the Treasury Boffins in Victoria. Most things now in Victoria don't get across the line unless they've got a cost-benefit analysis. So I think that you really, I mean, you need to agree, and I can say in Victoria, and it sounds like in WA and the states where it's got across the line, you've got to agree that it's a priority. And I'm not sure in New South Wales whether there's agreement it's a priority. I would say it has to be because it's actually what the kids want. Like in Victoria, it's what the kids wanted. So, I mean, is everybody in agreement in New South Wales? It's what you want to do?
All right.
That's a rhetorical question.
Well, we've got 20 minutes of that reflection, so we might take that question on to the group for our wrap up. We've got another, yes. I'll give you a, sorry.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, the ad campaign sounded very impactful, and I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to have a look for New South Wales to look at that campaign and see how you ran it, and maybe sort of tweak it for New South Wales. I think these things cost a lot of money. Yours worked. Can we do something similar?
Oh, look, it was very good. It was the first of its kind. I don't think this sector has ever done anything like that, because you have to be pretty brave, right? But it was a radio campaign that was, every time it ran, every day, you could tell there were reverberations within the public service, and they just wanted the ads to stop. The minister wanted the ads to stop, and was screaming, getting on the phone, tell them to stop those ads. Great. Because women picking up their kids from school were hearing them, and then they were signing their petition and ringing up, going, "This is appalling. What do you mean we're throwing these kids out at 18? I wouldn't do that to my kids. What is the state government doing? This is irresponsible." So I think that it was very effective. It wasn't that expensive. I mean, I would say in New South Wales, if a few of the organisations could put their hands in their pockets, you could run that really, really good. And Paul, Paul could tell you, we've got the scripts, haven't we, Paul? You could run those. But you've got to hold your nerve, right? I mean, I can say in Victoria we had Paul at the helm, and he held his nerve because people don't like it when you do that. And it was hard, and it didn't always. People weren't always going, "Great, you're running the radio ads." It was a tough fight in Victoria. I mean, I know people look at us and go, "Oh, here they go again." Those bloody people down there. But we still had to have courage to get this across the line. But yeah, if you need a help with the ads, we'll help you.
Oh, thanks, Steve. Well, one other. You got one more question? Okay, and then we'll wrap it up.
Hey, sorry. You mentioned before about how important ministers can be when you're talking about the homestretch issue, but you also mentioned the internal advocacy from inside the department. Should we in New South Wales be putting more pressure on higher ups in the department that aren't necessarily the minister?
Look, there was a while where the department weren't supportive. They go, "Oh, we've got leaving care initiatives," look, I'll be very blunt with you. If you've got leaving care initiatives that are basically sitting in homelessness services, you are by default making young people in care homeless because they're going into homelessness services. You need to think long and hard about whether you want those programs. They're shocking because they have to go to a homeless service when they leave
There's a representative of. There was a Green MP here earlier this morning, and their advisor. Yeah, do you want to? Yeah, have a chat. We could make something happen here, folks, live. Go on, Deb.
Our independents and our Greens got the legislation up by putting pressure on the government and the opposition. If you want to do something, introduce a private member's bill around legislating this properly and getting an entitlement in legislation. Bring forward a bill to enshrine an entitlement for 21. Again, another thing the government is not necessarily going to do without some pressure from crossbenchers and independents and Greens. So there's lots that people can do to create a frisson in Parliament amongst politicians.
Oh, very good. And we're getting nods from the good representative of the member. All right. Well, look, we need to wrap it up there. That was great, Deb. Please thank Deb Zabaris. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Deb. I'll hand it back to you, Liz, and to take us. And just on the ads, what was interesting, and even though it was brave, the ads were deliberately directed towards the New South Wales community, not to the government. It didn't say, government, come on. That was we felt that was too, well, not in the tone of the campaign. We've never been like that in the campaign. But we talked in those ads, talking of those ads, and it's not every state got over the line without, they didn't do the ad in every state. West Australia didn't, and South Australia didn't. But what was interesting is we talked to the community, but the government was going, what are they saying? What is that? Come on, why should we have a community where come on New South Wales, or no, the ad was, come on Victoria, let's bring this home for all young people in our state. And that was the interesting, so you didn't get a government up defensive because we weren't talking to the government through the ads. And Deb was right, they were going nuts every time the ad went. They were going nuts. But you just held it, and then they celebrated it. So you think, oh, how do I keep this relationship going? But no, it all then bounces back. It's like elastic. We're feeling stretched, and then it comes back again. Something I've observed in New South Wales is that the sector has a different relationship to the government. It's an interesting relationship from an observer point of view. But I think there's a lot more upside yourselves can have with the government to get them to do things without ruining the relationship, without stopping the funding. It never happens. They have a persona like you, don't. But we never test it. Once you test it, and I was a former bureaucrat, you're still sitting there saying, they've got a point, how do we brief on this? And the minister going, no, and inside going, what the hell, what are we going to do? So don't necessarily assume in this state, and I'm not telling you anything, but after seeing a number of sectors and their interface around the country with their governments, in New South Wales we're a bit shy here in putting it to the government. And, Conservative government introduced it, led it in South Australia. I want to say, I don't know what that's in their DNA, and I'm not suggesting we explore why we're shy, but what I think the home stretch story is that you can be personable, but persistent and insistent in a personal way on this reform. And a government does come across, and you still keep those relationships. In fact, those relationships are richer after that battle. So anyway, I think that's a takeout. I'll throw to Liz, and then she can take the quick, or through you to Liz.
Can I just ask one more question? I just think, what language do you think is most impactful when you're having these conversations with government, with bureaucracy? Do you have a formula where you have a particular, you have particular stats that you throw at them, or messaging? I used to work in the refugee sector, and we had to change our language completely, and it became much more impactful. Is there a specific sort of formula you use in this Make It 21 campaign to affect that change?
I think that's an excellent question. Can I just take 2 minutes to have a go at answering that? First of all, all the ministers and the opposition people, but particularly the ministers I've walked into the room of, I've always taken the view that I get your problems, right? You've got problems. You're getting advice, and you've got a Congo line. You've got these demands. So there's a recognition. It's because a minister's sitting there thinking this, and I've worked for a few of them. They're thinking, I've got the child protection portfolio, right? It's not the right. I got the short straw, and I'm going to try and get through this portfolio without an incident. Not I'm going to do something, but without an incident. And by the way, Paul, you're asking me to what? Stay another 3 years? So this is all in his head or her head before you even walk in the door, right? So we've got to recognise that. We've got to say, this is it, and there's an understanding of the things that are in front of them. There's an understanding and recognition of the demands and why should you. Then you move to, but this is the only group, Minister. This is your group anyway. This is not a new group. I'm not sitting in front of you saying, look, we've got a problem over here. I know you're busy, but could you come over and see this group? In fact, no. So there's some recognition. You need to have a conversation where there's, we're talking about the same. I'm talking about the ones of, it's not new. The second thing is that this is the group that's, another thing that I go through. I always hear from a minister that in their head. Well, I make those, that's what they're thinking. Here's another one. But I got a Congo line, but what about kindergartens, early childhood? Oh, what about, I've got abuse in care going all over the place. I've got this, and you want me to add this. I say, in your Congo line, I'm sure there's many, but there's only one standing in this queue, Minister, and that is, these are the only group under your current legal obligation. These are the only ones that are statutorily responsible by your government. They're in a queue on their own. Don't give me so there's that. And then we move to the personal. Not I do, but they start to. Minister in Tasmania, I've got 5 children. And we start talking like this. Treasurer, I was there for 5 minutes showing him the Deloitte, and he moves it aside, said, best piece of work I've ever seen by an advocacy agency, but put that aside, I've got an 18-year-old. The opposition spokesperson in Tasmania, Dad, a story about Dad. Simone McGurk, there's a story about her family. This issue we've all got a story here. We all know either our story or I've got children, and that starts to play in. And so I don't talk leaving care, never talked, and I don't understand why people keep talking about leaving care, because that wasn't the care that I experienced, or many of the people who talk about leaving care, how successful it is, experience. No, they're all in continual care with their parent. So I do bring the personal, so it's a recognition of the minister's problems, one. It's an acknowledgement that in fact it's not a new group, two. And there's always a personal story. And then with the important bit of interpersonality, if I can put it like that, because they're not going to say yes for the first time. So Simone McGurk, 5 visits to Perth, Mark and I walking in. Each time, it was sort of almost passive. Love this. You're preaching to the converted, Paul. I'm thumbs up. But nothing would happen. I'd go in again. How are you going with it? Not last time you said nothing, but nothing. No. How are you going with it? Where's your thinking? It must be tough with Treasury. Is there anything I can... 5 visits before we saw a trial. Now, we've got to be persistent here in this state, henskins. And there's the final thing I'll say, there's 2 reasons why, I'm generalising here, maybe there's 3 reasons, why a government or minister will make a decision yes. First thing is that the government thought of it themselves. They thought of it themselves, right? And as a senior bureaucrat, I'll tell you what the second reason is. Will we tell the? How do we shut those? I'm always getting letters. How do we just close this off? Can't we do something here? Can we just do something? Can we just give persistence? You could say that's annoying. Well, we've always got a relationship, but we're persistent. And a third thing that Deb said, leading up to budget or leading up to election, Victoria was a budget decision. West Australia, South Australia, Tasmania was a pre-election decision. Okay, so the dynamics here, I think it's 2022, 2023, 2022 next election. Two? It's 23, isn't it? I thought it was 23. So it might be too long initially, but a campaign around that budget. We've got a minister, we've got a premier with 6 children. A premier with 6 children. What's not to love about that for Homestretch? That is Homestretch DNA all over the place. Let's use that individually. The final thing I'll say, I'll throw it on this, is the most important thing that we got this over the line is it wasn't a boring old letterhead with a tosser McDonald with Homestretch letterhead. By the way, I'm representing 15, please do it. No, didn't get over the line. Each individual. Rotary started to write. The Peak was Peak on its own. That is Centre for Excellence. We're just banging. Individual agencies were writing. The grandmother in the street. Under all, not Homestretch, under their story, that board member, that chairperson, that company, and the young person's voice, exposing that. So it's not about, this is, could I put it this way? We're only an umbrella. We're not the gathering spot. We're not the delivery. We're not the trigger. Homestretch is not the trigger to get this over the line. This is the attention. Now yourselves, Aqua, Uniting, Bernardo's, Mission, Create, all have to do your own strategy, and then we'll all arrive together in the one spot. Our arrival point will be our together point. Our starting point's our together point. Our administration of that is not our together point. We start together and we'll arrive together. But in between is only made up of everyone's individual actions, not a Homestretch action. That's the last sort of takeout I'd say.
So thanks, Paul. So we're working to wrapping up now, and of course what we're asking you to do is think about what you personally can do to support the campaign and what your organisation can do. Now, what I've taken away from today is the evidence is there, the financial modelling there, the moral obligation is there. That's a no-brainer. We're not to talk about leaving care. It's broken, it's stuffed. It actually makes things worse for kids. So for me, in listening to what Mark's just said, and Deb and Paul, we've got to amplify the voices of young people, because they are saying this is what they need. So how do, Lani, Matthew, we've all heard the stories. I see it every day. So how do we do that in a way that actually empowers young people to champion this for themselves? I'm thinking I've got 300 kids on my books that I could try and, galvanise their voice. And how do we do that in a way that empowers them? I think the other thing for me is I'm not convinced we're all on the same page. We haven't got enough people in the room here. We haven't got key stakeholders who should be here. I'm thinking our Aboriginal partners, our homelessness peaks, all the people that, Minister Hazard, when I was in the department, I had to work quite closely with him. He's someone who's really passionate about kids in care and improving outcomes. He's head of health, got a few things on his plate at the moment, but I'm sure he hasn't forgotten about these kids. Why aren't we targeting him as well? Speak close to the mic, sorry. So for me, it's about, I don't think we have got everyone on the page. I don't think people do understand just how critical this is. So I think we've got a bit of an awareness campaign that we have to do to really marshal the troops to get the support, and then we go in. And I think timing absolutely around the 2023 election. How do we make sure that we are ready to go and that we're laying the foundations for that now? And I think the legacy piece is really important as well. Let's tug at the heartstrings. You'd hope that politicians are going into this because they do actually want to make a difference. So this is the opportunity that we are handing to them on the plate. So I'm keen to hear from others about where you're at and what you're thinking. Yeah, sure.
As you heard earlier, I'm sort of chairing New South Wales, and there's some cracking ideas that have come out today that we can utilise. We've got some pre-formatted template letters that you can utilise and send out. If every organisation does this, again, you're hearing it's a war of attrition to some extent. These ads will make this happen. I'm really keen to actually hear and actually see those in person, and we'll see if we can get a copy and actually circulate it out as well. But I think a lot of it comes down to, like you just heard there from Liz, it's down to the individuals. You know, in fact, Matthew's just told me that on Wednesday he meets with Minister Henskins. So there's the opportunity, is just planning ahead. What is it that I can say? I'm only going to get a minute maybe to talk to him, but what is the impactful statement? So every time, as I know a lot of you will meet with Minister Henskins and the rest of his team, is just keep hammering away and keep pushing forward this message. I am hearing from CEOs in our sector at quite a high level who are not really getting their head around it. So I would also say, educate those around you. So go and, you now know, I hope I set out the 4 goals for today. You know the difference between extended care and leaving care. And we shouldn't muddy the two together. Paul's exactly right. They got to be, it's a campaign. It's a focused campaign. We really encourage you to also, many of you are members of the Homestretch Committee. We meet on a monthly basis, pulling together what's our next strategy and the next thing that we're knocking over. We believe that Minister Henskins is probably going to move within the next month to a new portfolio. So our investment in trying to get him over the line is coming really short. We're hoping to use what we've learned today as an opportunity to actually ask for action, ask for him to be courageous, and maybe this could be his legacy by actually just starting a tiny little pilot to get this rolling. So really encourage all of you to, jump on board with these kind of ideas. I do think the young people here today, you have an immense power within your hands and your words. So please do try and utilize that and have the courage. You both spoke very, very well today. And I just think you possibly are that gem as well that really can help us get through there. That's just my little view. Excuse me getting on my high horse, but back to you.
So we're looking at wrapping up. Has anyone got any questions or ideas?
I'm confused, Graham from the Burdekin Association. I'm confused about sort of the governance. So, like, is the New South Wales Committee resourced to get a letter together that everybody could co-sign? And if you did that, would there be some major players from the sector that wouldn't sign? Is that what I'm hearing today?
We've had a lot of organisations that have co-signed letters to go through, and we can do that whole round again because we've done this with former ministers as well. So, to me, it's a war of attrition. The more we keep doing this, the more it's likely to happen. Burdekin, I don't think, has been on that letter in the past, so it'd be great to have them join this as well. There's quite a few logos that weren't included within that big PowerPoint page there of logos. Again, it's shared with Irina, who can then just add your organisations to the large number. I think it's 2,000 we've got now, Paul. 2,000 organisations that have already made a commitment to actually be a part of this. So, and I have spoken to Justine Gordon from Burdekin to see if there could be a representative from Burdekin to join the committee as well. So we know you've got a very strong relationship with Minister Henskins, for example, but there's many more out there. There's Bernardo's, there's many organisations out there that we'd love to have on that committee just to help being that voice to keep hammering away. Does that answer your question, or is there more that we can do to help?
I think the answer to that really is that Paul and Irina, so Jason's the New South Wales chair, but Paul and Irina are the secretariat, and they provide secretariat support and some financial support for the campaign. But we are really looking to grow that support. We just don't have enough support in New South Wales. And I think for me, that's the take home about how do we actually expand our network and get more organisations to sign up with time and money to help us actually crack this. Because at the moment, it's a small number of people that have been working on it for 5 years. I'm reasonably new to the committee, but I think that's one of the things. I don't think we're all on the same page. I don't think we've got enough support. I don't think people understand just what it is that's needed, and we've got a fair bit of work to do pretty quickly around educating the sector exactly what the challenge is and what the solution is. I think that's the take home for me. Paul, is there something?
Yeah, just a couple of things. We've got a war chest, by the way. The Fairfax family have kicked in $100,000 over 2 years. And the Potter family have kicked in 50,000 or 50,000 per year for both New South Wales and Queensland. So, but what's interesting is you might ask, well, how did the ads run? Well, 5 philanthropists came together and gave us $500,000 just Victorian base. Now, New South Wales has got deeper philanthropic pockets around in this city particularly, and I think that, you know, we can go to philanthropy. We've managed, and you know, Irene and I directly went to the Fairfax family, knowing what an important family they were in New South Wales, and I went, bang, okay, I want to know more. The Potter family, very hard to get. They're not a funder for everything, even though they're very well known. They said, yes, we'll fund New South Wales, Queensland. So the first thing I say is, who else philanthropically is out there? We as a secretariat will approach and think. The second point I'll say is, yes, co-signing a letter is a good idea, but I'll tell you what's better. If Burdekin even, if the Burdekin Institute, and I love Brian, and send him my regards, if the Burdekin Institute wrote that letter and saying this, the thing is, what you want a minister to do is, oh, not them too. A minister doesn't look at a letterhead with 10 signatories and go, oh, not them too. He goes, oh, that mob, right? But if they, oh, not them too. Oh, what? They talking about it too. Oh, it starts to come from different corners. That's when real pressure happens within a ministerial private office, in the sense of getting them thinking, this is bigger than just this home stretch group. In fact, this is now community people are starting to write, or community organisation. That's the other encouragement I'd say to you.
And the point with individual letters is that they have to write an individual response. If we do a form letter, then we'll just get the same crappy response that we get now that says there's nothing wrong with leaving care, it's fine. So I think that's why we actually have to tailor individual and make them work, instead of just having, you know, a standard generic response to us.
Hi, my name's Patty. I'm a solicitor and I work with a lot of young people in out-of-home care. I'm part of a specialised team in legal aid. But because we work as direct representatives, right now we do a lot of our work in the aftercare space. So we're, as a team, we're also part of an aftercare group called the Transition into Independence Forum. And there's lots of tension. I know, like, the home stretch wants to, you know, sort of pull away from the leaving care and aftercare part, but that still exists in New South Wales, and we see it, especially as direct representatives, the struggle that young people have in that space. And I think we're often, when we're trying to advocate for young people, we're often told, no, home stretch is not interested in that, because you do want to separate extended care from aftercare. But is there some way of building the bridge, even if it isn't in as part of a campaign, but engaging that aftercare sector, who are way under-resourced but doing amazing work, and are really the advocates, the direct advocates for a lot of young people? How do we get that, support that sector, and get that sector also supporting home stretch?
I'd be really keen to talk to you about that. I'm really passionate about aftercare, and the horror stories I could tell you about kids that have been totally done over by the justice system, and their futures just pulled out from under them within the, you know, just plead guilty and pull out of your law degree, and, you know, now they don't have a job, and, you know, don't get me started. Really keen to talk to you about it. I think we do have to do more so people know what their rights are, because I don't think that kids actually even know they're entitled to a leaving care plan, let alone there's something called extended care. I was blown away by that. I did some work with Create probably about 5 years ago under Minister Hazzard, because people were complaining about the term leaving care. I went out and did the consultations with the young people with Create, and they didn't even know they had any rights or entitlements. They said it's so crap, doesn't matter what you call it. So absolutely understand, keen to do some stuff behind the scenes, but I think we've just got to, as Paul said, we've got to really focus on this. I think it's two separate things, and I'm happy to talk to you about it.
Look, I think it's a very good point. And the reason why we emphasise this is not leaving care is because, can I put it pragmatically like this? So you walk into a minister's office and you say, Minister, we've got extended care for 21 or we can improve leaving care. I tell you what, you walk out there, and we should. No, it's not. Minister, we need to extend care and we need to improve leaving care. He'll sit there with his advisor and say, which one can we, we'll go to leaving care. Right? Now, in the sense, we've got to improve leaving care, and there's a role for leaving care. Extended care. Not every kid wants to continue their care. They want to have some leaving care support. What is not at dispute out there is that we don't talk down leaving care, but in the sense to emphasise, because I think it's just got a bit foggy sometimes. So this is part of the campaign, emphasising what is extended care, rather than it's an improved or a magnified version of leaving care. That's the first comment I'd make. Number two is on campaigning. You know, you've got the pink test here in Sydney, haven't you, for breast cancer. I'm going to use this as a metaphor. So McGrath comes out and talks about breast cancer, this and that. I never hear him talk about, oh, by the way, there's prostate cancer that we need to fix as well, and there's lung. He just talks about that. In campaigning, you start the conversation and you end the conversation with the same thing. And that's what the chairs around the country on homestretch asked, well, is there anything from the homestretch thinking in talking to a minister that we can do with the minister? And all we said was start the conversation with extended care and end the conversation with extended care. Very quickly in this thing, and the reason why I'm with that particular about it is you can end up starting the conversation in extended care and you ended up in leaving care and trying to improve leaving care. And that's the thing. So leaving care has a place, but we're quite clear, additionally, like every other state, they love their leaving care programs, and in fact, the extended care is administered through a leaving care officer in Victoria, okay? But it's seen as the extended care, it's the home stretch bit. So it's not about competing or trying to nail one to the other. Yes. Yeah. Oh, good. No, very much so. They're an important ally, absolutely important ally. They see sort of the casualties, so we have to bring them in.
Kathy.
Can I just say, I think there's actually something really important about that, because there is a significant message around confusion, around language, around leaving care and aftercare and moving towards independence. For me, I'm hearing you both talk about exactly the same things, and we're talking about different extending care and supporting young people as they move into their adult years is the same concept around what we're doing, what people are trying to do. And so there's something around the language of how we're talking about that I'm not sure if I'm just calling it out or I'm confused about how we actually message that and be more consistent about the concept of independent living and the concept of continuing care or extending care.
I think for us, as a solicitor, the thing that pops into my head straight away is extended care is legislated and it becomes a completely different thing, and that's when it's very different. So if we are trying to support extended care, we want it down in black and white law. So we don't, and that's different. Right now we just have a leaving care process that doesn't support young people very well. Like I think you said yourself, it's a mess, it's broken. And I think for me, they are very different things. So I think within the aftercare sector, I can't speak for everybody, but definitely the TIF members, it is very clear the difference for us. But we are living in that aftercare space in the work that we deliver.
So I'd just like to thank everyone for your time today. This is a very important step in, I think we've got a long road ahead of us, but just having you all here, come out in person, make that effort. The committee will be having another meeting after this and reviewing our strategy, I think for me it's about how do we broaden the net, how do we increase the number of stakeholders, how do we get the clear communication out there about what the campaign is and what we need people to do to support that. So I'd just like to thank all of you, and you'll be hearing from us. Please join us for lunch.